Hi, it's Ramsey Dewey at the JX Fight Club in Shanghai, China. Welcome to another edition of Q&A with the coach. Our first question comes from Chamoru Warrior. Okay, he says, Ramsey, I love your videos, thank you. Not martial arts related, but you're one of the few in the world who can answer. How do you create YouTube videos when YouTube is illegal in China? Okay, good question. YouTube is blocked in China. Google is blocked in China. Facebook is blocked in China. Instagram is blocked in China. Most major American social media websites, video sharing websites are blocked in China. We call it the Great Firewall of China. It's over the whole country's internet. You can't access these things unless you use a virtual private network, a VPN. So if you do that, it's super easy to bypass the Great Firewall of China. So yeah, I'm using a VPN to upload these videos. I use a VPN to watch YouTube, to read your comments, etc. So that's how I do it. Don't tell Big Brother. Shh. Our next question comes from Brendan Jackson. It's a short question. I'm going to give you a relatively short answer. He says, who are better kickers, karate or taekwondo practitioners or Muay Thai practitioners? And what is more efficient and effective, the Thai roundhouse kick or the snappy taekwondo karate kick? All right, there are a million videos out there addressing this topic with visuals, even scientific instruments measuring the power and the speed of these various kicks. But here's the short answer. Those snappy taekwondo and karate kicks are great for the head, and the power comes from the speed. So if you are fast, that's a great option. The Thai round kick telegraphs itself a little bit more, but if you're kicking the leg, that should be your only option. Snap kicks to the leg will do barely any damage. But Thai round kicks with the weight behind it, that will. Now, a Thai round kick to the head, yeah, that can score a knockout, and that's a great technique. Got to set it up, because again, it does telegraph itself quite a bit more than the snappy karate kicks. So I'm going to say, really, neither one is better. I use both. I use a lot of different styles of kicks, and I think all good fighters should be well versed in all styles of kicking. Snap kicks and round turning kicks too. Do it all. They're both good, but good for different purposes. Next question. Our next question comes from Danville, who says, it seems that there are no pure catch wrestling schools or detailed videos on how to learn to be a good catch wrestler, at least not where he lives. Any suggestions? Okay, that's a good point. Catch wrestling is kind of an esoteric grappling art. There are not a lot of catch wrestling gyms in the world. And so that seems like it limits you. Most grappling schools out there seem to be Brazilian jiu-jitsu and judo, and those are fairly easy to find, but catch wrestling, not so much. Especially if you live in a part of the world like the People's Republic of China, like I do. So what do? First, do what the actual catch wrestlers did to learn catch wrestling back in the day. They would pick up techniques as they traveled, as they went. They would meet other wrestlers, other grapplers, and they would learn techniques from them. There wasn't really a catch wrestling school that they went to. They would learn how to wrestle, and then they would learn the holds and the stretches and the hooks. Those are terms for submissions in catch wrestling. And they would compete. So that's pretty much how I learned catch wrestling. First, learn how to wrestle. That's the most important part of catch wrestling. It's in the name. The other part is the catch. Meaning catch as catch can. Catch a part of the body and try to break it. Learn the holds, learn the hooks, learn the stretches, the submissions, if you will. Learn how to break humans. But first, learn how to wrestle. Now, there are lots of great resources on learning how to wrestle. A lot of them online, a lot of fantastic videos. Not necessarily catch wrestlers, but you need to understand amateur wrestling first. So understand freestyle wrestling, folk style wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling. Study those. Learn your takedowns. Learn your duck unders, learn your sit-outs, learn your ground wrestling. Learn all that good stuff. Learn your snap downs. Man, snap downs, that's such a valuable tool. Is that all of those techniques that allow you to control your opponent will precede any type of attack. Position first, and then attack. Position, control, attack. That is the mantra of all grappling, including catch wrestling. So, instead of thinking of catch wrestling as a place, think of it as a set of rules, or a very broad set of rules, if we'll, lack thereof. Meaning, you win in catch wrestling by pin or by submission. So, if you don't have a catch wrestling place to train at, train with those rules. Get some training partners, get some mats, see if you can pin each other, and see if you can make each other give up, say uncle, or tap out. After that, what are some good sources for catch wrestling? I mean, there are some good books out there. If you look up Billy Robinson, the late great Billy Robinson, he put out a number of YouTube videos before he passed about catch wrestling technique. You can find some videos of seminars that he put on. He teaches great techniques like the gravet and some leg locks and some really cool stuff there. Look up fighters like Josh Barnett. There's some videos he's got on YouTube about catch wrestling. Look up Jake Shannon. He's written a number of books on the art of catch wrestling. I believe he's also got some videos on YouTube. Look up Brandon Ruiz. Brandon Ruiz, he's competed in all grappling sports that I know of. You know, he's a wrestling champion, submission wrestling champion, catch wrestling champion. He's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. I mean, this guy's done pretty much everything as far as grappling goes. Look up Neil Melanson. Yeah, look up Neil Melanson. Neil Melanson has a bunch of grappling experience, including catch wrestling experience. So yeah, watch his channel. That's one of my favorite channels on YouTube. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I think it's on the Hayabusa channel specifically, because he is sponsored by Hayabusa. So yeah, again, Neil Melanson, look him up. Good stuff. He also does jiu-jitsu and whatnot, but yeah, good source of info on some catch wrestling technique. So there is great information on catch wrestling out there, and I haven't even scratched the surface with what there is on YouTube, let alone what there is out there in the world. But first, learn how to wrestle, learn position, and then, again, if you can't find a school or a gym or whatnot, yeah, check out YouTube, find out how to do some submissions and whatnot. And even if you learn these submissions from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they're effectively, it counts, because catch wrestling is no holds barred. As long as you're not pinned on your shoulders, you can do it. So it's a fantastic way to train, in my opinion, even for Jiu-Jitsu guys, because it forces you to learn the top game. It forces you to become 100% proactive in the grappling experience. There's no resting point. There's no stopping point. It's a high energy sport. And yeah, it's a rule set I really think every grappler should take the time to train with from time to time. Next question. Our next question comes from Oakland, who says, Ramsey, I want to hear you sing. Sing something classic like Elvis or Queen. Me without my guitar. I'll just pretend. Ain't nothing but a hound dog crying all the time. Ain't nothing but a hound dog crying all the time. Ain't nothing but a hound dog. I don't remember the words of this song. You ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, there you go. Hope you're happy now. What'd you make me go and do that for, man? Now everybody knows what my singing voice sounds like. Thanks to you. I hope you're happy. Our next question comes from James Dotson, who says, I have a question for you, Ramsey. Now, you said you started in Taekwondo and moved on to MMA. You also say that you studied Brazilian jiu-jitsu, wrestling, catch wrestling, boxing, Muay Thai, and what else? You're still a young man. So how on earth can you have studied all these arts since each takes lengthy training? I'm 40, guys. I'm 40 years old. Now, it's been a while since the average life expectancy of a human was like 32 years old, but 40 isn't exactly young, even in the year 2018. I'm 40 flippin' years old, man. I'm kind of shocked at how often people will call me young man on the internet. And I realize, according to analytics, about 8% of my viewers are senior citizens, and that's cool. I'm glad you guys are watching. And compared to you guys, I suppose I'm a young man at age 40, but I don't think by any reasonable stretch of the imagination 40 years old is a young man. That's called middle-aged. That means that I have lived approximately half of the average human life expectancy. So, how did I manage to study and train in all these martial arts at the young age of 40? So my very first martial art was Taekwondo. I did Taekwondo, started as a teenager, and I did that for quite a long time. That was my first martial art. At the same time, in college, we had a bunch of martial arts clubs on campus, which I joined, including the Capoeira Club and the Shotokan Karate Club, and of course the Taekwondo Club, and I did all of those. And it was great, and there was a jiu-jitsu club as well. It was a Budoshin jiu-jitsu club. That's the less awesome kind of jiu-jitsu. Sorry for all you Budoshin friends watching, but it just wasn't a great grappling experience. Anyway, so my early 20s, that's the sort of stuff that I was doing. When I finished college, I started to compete professionally in kickboxing, American kickboxing. And a few years later, I started to compete in Muay Thai. And a few years later, I started to compete in mixed martial arts. When I began to compete in mixed martial arts, I became painfully aware of all of my deficiencies in martial arts, specifically a lack of wrestling knowledge, a lack of jiu-jitsu experience, a lack of boxing skill. And so I made a very concerted effort to train in these arts. So here's the thing, when you are a mixed martial artist, you must become good at all of this stuff. You must become a good boxer. You must become a good kickboxer. You must become good at clinch fighting and Muay Thai and jiu-jitsu and wrestling and catch wrestling if that's your jam. You've got to become well-rounded in all ranges of hand-to-hand combat. And that requires a significant commitment of time and consistency. So I've dedicated decades of my life to this stuff, my friend, because I am not that young of a man. At the young, sprightly age of 40. So I hope that helps to answer your question. Our next question comes from our friend T-Bark, who says, hey coach, any advice when dealing with newcomers when doing light or no-touch sparring that don't take pressure? What I mean is, like, they simply ignore the motion of a frontal snap kick to the stomach and just keep going in because I held back on the power. Thanks. Okay. All right, I get it. You got these new guys and they're not used to light contact or touch sparring, and you tap them and they're like, oh, you didn't hurt me, so I'll just keep going. And you have to ask yourself a couple of questions. I mean, what do you want them to do? Do you want them to fall down and pretend to get knocked out? No. Now, light touch sparring is for you to learn. It is not for them to react a certain way. But I will give you one specific tip about that front snap kick. So instead of snapping it out there, touching them, turn it into a push kick. Because you can totally push somebody around with your push kick without hurting them. So you can absolutely make contact and push them without injuring them at all, especially with new students. I do that all the time. Now you can throw a damaging push kick with some snap and thrust behind it that can break somebody's ribs, knock the wind out of them, but no, you don't want to do that to the new guys in light touch sparring, but you can push them around. That's fine. So if you want a specific reaction, if you want them to respect the movement, that's one way to do it. But again, I'll see this a lot with new students. I'll spar with them for the first time, and I'll just touch them. My goal is just touch them on the side of the chin, and usually after like the sixth or seventh time, they're like, oh, I get what he's doing. I should probably get my hands up and protect that now. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're just like, you're not hurting me. I'm indestructible. Your punches are wimpy. I remember I had this student a few years ago, and after class, he asked to spar with me. And this guy was, how can I put this? He was a really small guy, kind of a wimpy guy, kind of a frail, slightly built dude. And I was genuinely afraid of hurting him. And so, I held back, just touching, and tagged him all over. And afterward, I could tell he had this smug look of satisfaction on his face. He was feeling pretty good about himself because he survived the sparring match with the coach. And afterwards, he came up to me and in this smug tone, he said, you don't hit that hard. And I just laughed a little bit like, oh man, he really didn't get what was going on there. I said, well, I wasn't trying to hurt you, Now, I'm totally fine with the fact that he honestly believed that I didn't hit that hard. It's not a matter of pride. I had nothing to prove to the guy. I didn't need to knock him around and beat him senseless or hurt him in order to make him understand that I have the capacity to do so. Because again, stick around a fight gym long enough, you'll get it. You'll understand that. So be patient with the new guys, even if they're living up in la la land in their head as far as the consequences of strikes. Just be patient with them. Our friend Vagabond Art asks this: can wimpiness be hammered out with the first fighting situation, or is it a gradual process, or would it be a case of different people, different paths? Wimpiness, you say. The process from going from wimpy to less wimpy to not wimpy to sort of okay at what you're doing to a little bit tough to a lot tough, that's a gradual process. I suppose it depends on how you define wimpy. Maybe a wimpy state of mind versus a state of mind that is conducive to winning fights. That's a different story. But as far as going from being a wimpy person, let's say both wimpy physically, emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, and in every other way that makes one a wimp, I would say that's a gradual process. Now, a fight, that first fighting situation, put a wimpy guy in a fight, it's going to make him painfully aware of a lot of things, specifically his wimpiness. So a lot of wimpy people don't realize that they are wimpy. Man, I used to be probably the wimpiest dude that I know. wimpier than most other people that I have met in my life. That was me. And that was an extremely gradual process. And I don't think I realized how wimpy I was until my first professional fight. Because I had amateur experiences in combat sports. I had tons of experience in sparring and traditional martial arts. But that first knockout, drag-out brawl in a professional kickboxing match, man, that was an eye-opener for how wimpy I truly was. Man. And I realized this is a process. We cannot go from wimpy to tough overnight. We can't. Not physically, not emotionally, not on any level. It's a process. So be patient with the process, my friends. There are no quick fixes. Throwing yourself into a combat situation doesn't fix it, doesn't remedy it right away. Next question. Our next question comes from our friend AdTiao94, who says, "Hey Ramsey, I'm a fairly fit, fairly tall, fairly young guy. I've been taking martial arts classes focusing on striking for about 7 years. In the last year, I've started to lose my vision from macular dystrophy. Do you have any ideas on how I should continue training as my vision decreases? I'm not really interested in winning competitions, though I wouldn't turn down the opportunity. It's mostly to stay fit and have a community." Okay. Now, I made a video before about blind people and fighting, where I addressed a lot of important issues that would definitely come into play here. But I'm going to tell you, after my last fight, it left me with a blind spot in one eye. And that got me thinking about this issue a lot. And I started reflecting on those old movies from the 80s, those old kung fu movies like, and those karate fighting movies like Bloodsport, where the guy is blindfolded and he's like training, and at the end of the movie, he's like fighting blind and does flying spinning kicks and stuff. And I'd say that's, in spite of what Frank Duke says, that's a little unrealistic. But grappling, on the other hand, I would say, especially if you're in it for a community, start to learn grappling, especially right now when you can still see what's going on. Because grappling is something you can do quite literally blind. And another thing I would recommend, especially if you like striking, is start learning the speed bag and the double end bag, because that's also something you can do blind. And those are tools that can teach you skill sets that can also translate into practical fighting. But they're a lot of fun, and there are a lot of great communities built up around speed bagging and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'd recommend that. So if you can see what's going on first, it'll be easier, but ultimately you don't need your vision to do those things. So man, I'm sorry that happened to you, dude. It's a tough break. Life is not fair, but at the same time, we are given the challenges that we need to progress in the way that we must. And sometimes that's a blind spot in the eye, sometimes it's both eyes. Sometimes it's growing up in poverty, sometimes it's having too much and not knowing what to do with it, and struggling with how to best use our time in a selfless way as opposed to a selfish way. We all have our crosses to bear, my friend. But not all of us take advantage of the lessons that we're able to learn from them. Good luck to you. Next question. Young Old Head says, "Are you gay?" No. Next question. This next question I get a lot from a lot of subscribers, which is, what is my opinion on Systema? Systema. Man. Brace yourselves, friends. Russian Systema. I've talked to a lot of my Russian friends about this, and none of them have ever heard of it. Now, I guess since this system of Systema comes from Russia, supposedly, that there would probably be some Russians out there who know what it is, but I haven't met them. I've never actually met a person who's practiced this. I've only seen it on the internet. And what I've seen is really, really weird, like super weird. Like people flopping around like a fish and other people like trying to touch that fish and then acting like they got electrocuted by that flopping around fish and then falling on the floor and weird stuff like that. So what do I think about that? Well, I'm going to come right out and say, I don't understand what's going on there. Maybe there is a method to this madness, but I don't know what it is and nobody seems to be explaining it. So from my perspective, it looks like crazy nonsense. And that's the only perspective I have right now. So if any of you guys understand the method behind the madness of this crazy fish dance they're doing, please explain it to me. Thanks for the question. Our next question comes from Remy Coldez, who says, I was discouraged learning martial arts when I was a kid because I said back then that I only want to learn killing blows and strikes, because why bother with anything else? My first question is, are they, namely my parents, right to discourage me from learning martial arts? And second, if you condition your body like only to train to kill, can you really accidentally kill someone? All right, Remy, there are a lot of martial arts myths out there. A lot of people believe in one-punch death strikes and things like that. And the thing is, it is possible to kill somebody with a single strike, but generally, we're talking about people who have pre-existing medical conditions. Ordinarily, it's really hard to kill people with strikes. As in really, really hard. Meaning you've got to get them, you beat them up to the point where they are helpless on the ground and just keep hitting and hitting and hitting and hitting them until they die. I mean, think about people who get stabbed to death. When you hear stories in the news about people who were stabbed to death, it's always like, it's never they were stabbed once and then they died. It's like, the killer stabbed them 300 times. Sounds kind of weird, right? Why would it take 300 stab wounds to finally kill someone? Takes a lot of stab wounds to make somebody bleed out, essentially. Weirdly, I know your question wasn't about stabbing, but knives are way more lethal than hands. Knives are so much more dangerous than punches, and yet there's like a 80% survival rate from stab wounds. Stab wounds are super dangerous. I mean, this stuff literally can kill you, but there's an 80% survival rate from stab wounds. And again, that's why we hear these stories about people being stabbed 50, 100, 200, 300 times. So, going back to fists, can we toughen up our fists and our punches and have this capacity to kill with a single strike? Realistically, no. Can you kill somebody with martial arts? Yeah. I mean, I could show you a dozen different ways to kill somebody with martial arts. Most of them don't involve striking. Most of them involve strangulation. There are a lot of ways to strangle people. Rear naked choke, for example, triangle choke, Darce choke. Those are all methods to kill people, ultimately. In combat sports, they're generally used to make somebody tap out before they pass out, but the ultimate goal of all those techniques is to kill. And it has absolutely nothing to do with striking. So are your parents justified in being worried that you are going to turn into an accidental killer and accidentally kill people with your death punches? I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. Now, this is not a judgment on you or saying that you don't have any skills in martial arts or can't acquire them. You absolutely can, right? If you dedicate the time and the consistency to training, you can become an exceptional martial artist, my friend. And I recommend it because it's life-changing in a positive way. Martial arts is not all about just damaging and hurting and killing people. Yes, it is violent action. But what it does is it teaches us to control violence. It teaches us meekness. It teaches us to be a warrior in a garden rather than a gardener in a war, if you will. Now, this was a two-part question. And I really want to focus on this part about your parents being worried and discouraging you from learning martial arts. I suppose they're worried that you might get into trouble. They're worried that it might make you more violent. And I get questions from people a lot. I have a friend who has some kids, some young boys, and she wants them to have an outlet for their aggression, because kids like to run around and jump and fight and wrestle and do all this stuff, and she wants them to have a positive outlet for it. But she was worried that if she put them in a martial arts class, that they would become trained killers and use ninja killing techniques against each other. And I'm going to tell you, that's probably not going to happen. Because if you have an instructor worth his salt, he's going to teach you these techniques in the context in which they should be used. Context is for kings, my friends. Martial arts is violent action, yes. Combat sports is violent action, yes. But is it all about violence? No. At the end of the day, martial arts is about whatever you want it to be about. But what it can be about is something extremely positive, to uplift the human soul and transcend our limitations in some very, very awesome ways. Thanks for the question. Good luck in your martial arts journey, my friend. Now get out there and train. Our last question comes from Archcaliber X. I'm going to read this question in its entirety, even though it's pretty long, because I like the way it's worded. He says, Coach, or anyone in the comments, I had this situation last week. Tell me what you think. So I have a new Grandmaster. As soon as you said that, man, red flags went off in my mind, like, man, if a dude's calling himself Grandmaster, watch out. Man, I've met a couple of actual masters of martial arts over the years, and none of them called themselves any highfalutin title like Grandmaster or Sifu or whatever. None of them address themselves as that. Now, I'm not saying nobody who calls themselves Grandmaster or Sensei or Sifu or whatever can't be legitimate. It's just I found that the people who really are the best and the people who are the most deserving of those titles generally don't use them. I mean, look at, say, Helio Gracie, the founder of Brazilian Jiu-jitsu. He essentially had the highest rank in Brazilian Jiu-jitsu. He was the Grandmaster. But for most of his teaching career, he wore a blue belt. Not a black one, not a red one, not the red and white stripy Grandmaster belt, but a blue one, which is the second rank after the white belt in Brazilian Jiu-jitsu. And this confused a lot of people. Again, he was a couple of things. Old school, because in Brazilian Jiu-jitsu, why is that word so hard to say after practicing this martial art for so long? In the original Brazilian Jiu-jitsu, the ranks were different. They didn't have the same ranks as judo, white, blue, purple, brown, black. They had white belts for beginners, and then they had blue and dark blue for the advanced students and the teachers, essentially. So blue originally meant you were a teacher of the art. And so Helio used to wear the blue belt even after he awarded black belts. Even after the color change in the belts, he kept wearing the blue belt. And I like that. I like that a lot. I think it showed a certain type of humility, like, I'm not this highfalutin Grandmaster, I'm a teacher. So, back to the question. I know that was a long aside. So I have this new Grandmaster. I prefer to think of him as the head coach. Good for you, you should. But he banned kicking to the knee. More specifically, banned kicking with the sole of the foot anywhere below the waist. So not even allowed to kick to the thigh with anything other than a round kick. And let's stop right there. A lot of people on the internet believe that a kick to the knee will make your kneecap explode, that it will cripple you for life. And apparently this Grandmaster also believes that. I've received so many comments in videos, especially videos regarding self-defense, where people in the comments genuinely believe that touching the knee with the sole of the foot will make your knee explode and cripple a person. And most of the time, that is simply not the case. Let's go on. I'm new at the school, so he was cross with me. He found out that I was practicing low side kicks and oblique kicks. The thing is, we were not even going 50%, more like 25% touch play fighting. I also notice no one at the school knows how to defend these kicks. They just take them as if they didn't happen. In Savate, where I learned the moves, I'd never heard of anyone getting their knee crushed from a low side kick, even in competition. And that is at full contact. And yeah, if you watch the UFC right now, a lot of people are throwing those low side kicks at the knee or at the thigh, and so far I haven't seen anybody's knee explode. And a big part of that reason is fighters are practicing these moves, practicing to defend them, practicing to balance themselves, and so yeah, they're probably not going to suffer catastrophic injuries from them. But he goes on to say, generally you target the thigh, which, hold on, I lost my spot in the question, yes. Yeah, with these kicks, yeah, generally we are going to target the thigh, you are correct. Which is what I was thinking. But anyway, he banned low kicks and made all the other coaches kowtow and agree they'd ban them too. I'm worried I won't get realistic training if anyone is shielded from how to fight, ignoring these day one strikes. Now that's interesting that you mentioned this as a self-defense class, like a self-defense type of gym. Now, if you had said this is like a taekwondo gym or some combat sport with a very specific rule set, then I would say, okay, defer to what your instructor says. For example, if I go to visit a jiu-jitsu gym where they don't do heel hooks, because a lot of jiu-jitsu gyms won't, and they think heel hooks are evil and bad and wrong, and if you touch somebody's foot in that way, it'll make their knee explode. And so I'll always ask them first, like, do you roll with heel hooks here? And if they say, yeah, cool, I'll roll with the heel hooks. And if not, then, you know, I'll respect that and I'll abide by the specific rule of their gym. But since this is a self-defense gym and they're blatantly saying no to something that is a legitimate self-defense technique that can and should be practiced in a safe and controlled manner, and it sounds like you are attempting to practice this in a safe and controlled manner, and you do have experience with these techniques through Savate, which is a great martial art that can teach you a lot about kicking the legs with the soles of the feet, then that's a problem. So let's get back to this question. I wanted to teach everybody that it's not a big deal, that pro fighters all know how to defend these strikes, and that I'm not hitting hard enough to even threaten a leg or knee, but he would have none of it. Obviously, I'll get thrown out, or other students will think I'm a troublemaker or a dickhead. Language, if I keep doing them, but I seem so limited now that I'm not sure what we're training for. Is it taekwondo, sport karate, made up random kung, rate, do, re, mi? I can't tell. What would any of you do in this situation? Thanks for reading it this far if you have. Well, we read it. Arch Caliber X, we have read it. And I hear you. All right. If it gives you the result you want, then that's the right way. If it is not giving you the result that you want, that's not the right way. So it sounds like what you want is something real, something genuine, like a combat sport, like Savate or kickboxing or Muay Thai or MMA or something like that, where techniques can be pressure tested in real life, in real sparring. And it also sounds like you want to have a gym where you can have an actual dialogue with your coaches like this about these concerns, and that's not happening. So my first instinct is to tell you, find another gym. Find another place to train. And it's entirely possible. I get a lot of questions from people from a town or a city where there simply is no other option to train. Like the one school where they have these rules or this coach or these training partners that they don't like or have a problem with, they're the only show in town. And that kind of sucks. So what do we do? Well, what I did personally in that situation, before I opened my own gym, and I opened my own gym for the first time back in the United States for a number of reasons, one of which I watched a lot of fights. I was fighting at the time myself, and I would watch this fight show every single week, and I would start to see patterns that nobody seemed to be paying attention to, exploitable patterns. And I thought, man, if I could just train some fighters, we could exploit those patterns and win fights. And so we did exactly that. We trained to exploit those patterns and we won fights, and it was cool. But another reason I opened up my own gym was because I didn't like the structure and the method and the way teaching went on at these other gyms. I didn't like their approach to pedagogy, the art of teaching. So I didn't feel it was the best use of my time. And I'm not suggesting that everybody who doesn't like the gym they go to go out and open their own, but sometimes that's not the worst idea. Now, opening up a gym is an expensive venture, but at the same time, you don't need 10,000 square feet of space and expensive mats and heavy bags and weights and all this stuff to get some training partners together and to work through some techniques and to learn some things. So maybe, if moving to another gym is not an option, try that. So, I think you know what you need to do. At the same time, there may be another issue which you may not have mentioned. A lot of gyms require that you buy a yearly membership, or maybe you've invested a bunch of money in this gym and it feels like it would be a waste to just leave. So you got a bit of a conundrum there potentially. But ultimately, I think you know what you want to do. And yeah, I'm right there with you. These techniques can and should be trained safely. At the same time, they can be trained dangerously. But as long as you understand the difference between light touch sparring and stomp the guy's knee to death, that's cool. But just make sure that when you train these techniques, your training partners and the people you teach these techniques to also understand the same thing. Because an oblique kick to the knee, put your weight into it. If they don't understand a good stance and they have their knees locked out, yeah, that can snap a knee in half. So make sure your teaching is just as good as your sparring methods. Thanks for the question. Good luck to you. Now get out there and train.